Welcome back to the 4AO Experience Day. We're previewing for you guys Kansas State, ASU. It's going to be a big game, Big 12 implications.
Yes,
we got
sir.
a packed show for here, you guys. I'm Strider here with Trav, so thanks for joining us. And let's just get started and let's talk about Kansas State. You know, they've had a little bit tougher of a schedule than Arizona State. Arizona State pretty weak this year, you know. But let's talk about Kansas State's best wins on the year. Colorado, solid win, we would say. Second in the Big 12 right now.
Okay.
West Virginia, about a mid-tier Big 12 team, solid team. Some West Virginia has some good wins, and then Tulane, which at the time didn't look like it was a fantastic win, but now looks a little bit better with Tulane getting some love from the AP poll this week. So Kansas State's had a little bit tougher of a schedule than Arizona State, but I wouldn't say that it's a lock for Kansas State to come out and win this one like the spread would say. It's about a 7.5 point spread, and I think that's downright disrespect for Arizona State and what they've done. But I think a lot of that comes from Arizona State just hasn't been good on the road.
Yeah, I would like to add this to the context of the good wins. They might have some really good wins, but I think they deserve the right to have some categories with bad wins and bad losses. And I think a bad win with Kansas State would be beating Kansas by 2 points. If Jaden Daniels doesn't fumble the ball in that last game-winning drive, Kansas State might have 3 losses right now. And then a bad loss in BYU, that was terrible to watch, and a bad loss in Houston in the rain.
Yeah.
So I feel like this team has definitely been very bipolar because they've shown shades of being the most dominant team in the Big 12, but then they really do play down to competition a lot of the times. I want to speak back on their good wins. I really was impressed that they were able to handle the Colorado game. Colorado came out really explosive that game. Kansas State was able to match it, and they had their own version of a game-winning drive. The Tulane game was very interesting. Darius Mensah for Tulane was very talented, but again, the Kansas State defense came up clutch, forcing a forced fumble, and they returned the fumble for a scoop and score. Kansas State, that was a good game early in the year because Tulane was looking to upset them. And then, beating West Virginia, that is a good win. West Virginia only has 2 Big 12 losses. But for this entire Wildcats team, I just want to say they're one-sided. They either blow you out or they will play down to competition. Some of their really great wins, like against U of A, just you would not expect them to blow out U of A that early in the year, especially when U of A was ranked.
Yeah, and U of A came into the season looking really solid. Didn't end up, being very solid. They're one of the, lower ends of the Big 12.
It's a funny top 25 matchup. Now we look back on it, it was like,
I know.
What? That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. It's like when Kansas State also beat Oklahoma State when they were still ranked. They were ranked 20 at the time. So some interesting matchups for KState this year. And let's take a look at, just why we're a little bit concerned about Arizona State here. 5-0 at home. Arizona State has been one of the best home teams, not just in the Big 12, but in the entire country this year, right?
Yes.
And you can't sit here and say that they've had the hardest Big 12 or home schedule, but a UCF is a quality win.
Yep,
right
same
there.
thing with Kansas.
Same with Kansas. Kansas looks like they're a solid team now. So some solid wins for Arizona State at home, and where the struggles come is on the road. Their only 2 wins being Oklahoma State and Texas State. And,
looks like we beat the state schools.
yeah, it can beat the state schools. So let's hope that keeps up for this weekend, because our 2 losses are obviously University of Cincinnati and then Texas Tech. So those are 2 pretty good Big 12 schools, but it can be argued that, for Cincinnati, if Levitt's not injured, maybe that's a win, right? That could be argued away, and then that Texas Tech loss was just pretty poor.
It was beginning of the year. It was
just
our
pretty
first
poor.
Big 12 game, and it was just a lot of, getting through the anxiety of playing in the Big 12.
Yeah.
I just want to say this. So coming from, Kenny Dillingham's statement of, a good Big 12 team is a good team at home. Are you really that scared of us on the road, or do you feel like some of those road losses are situational?
So as I was saying, I think the Cincinnati loss is situational. But what I'm more concerned about is the fact that if we had a couple bad losses on the road, but then we had like a defining road win, then I'd be able to those are situational. It's early in the season. We just they hadn't figured it out yet. But it's the fact that they haven't gotten their signature road win. Yeah. And we don't have a signature road win of the Kenny Dillingham era yet. And that's the only thing that concerns me. Levitt has been a fantastic quarterback. Love Jordan Tyson. And potentially Scadaboo. Have they announced his official status? Is he back?
Yeah.
He's back. I think I saw a video about that yesterday. So Cam Scadaboo's officially back for the Sun Devils. So, I'm excited that the whole team's healthy, right? But we don't have that signature win to look back on yet. And that could be something that's coming this week. A lot of Kenny's signature wins as a Sun Devil have come this year. They didn't come last year.
And I'll bring the Sun Devil advocate narrative to this, all right? So, Devil's advocate, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if these road wins that we have had are pretty defining, right? So when you actually bring the story to light, we're down 14 points against Texas State early in the season.
Yeah.
When we don't really have an identity, we're off of 2 good wins against Wyoming and Mississippi State.
Uh-huh.
Are we legit yet? Well, we didn't really know. Well, we came back down 2 possessions against a very explosive Texas State offense.
Yeah.
Now, come to the Oklahoma State game. Was a really competitive first half. We came through in the middle 8. We came through in that last score before halftime. So, obviously, when the rain delay came in, we were sitting pretty with the 7-point lead. But that second half ASU team was dominant.
Yeah.
Right? We just did not let Oklahoma State see the light of day. It wasn't just the clouds. It was us. We went out there, put 3 scores on the board. It was like nothing had ever happened. And I know on paper, these teams just don't look like the dominant CFB teams, right? So you can't count it as a good road win. But when you put the actual information there, it took a lot of adversity for that team to overcome in those 2 road situations. I do like some of those 2 road wins, but yes, you are right. This Kansas State has to be the first Dillingham road win of his coaching tenure. And I would like to add, last year against UCLA, that was a pretty good road win.
Yeah,
they went into Chip Kelly, into UCLA, no quarterback, and they had Cam Scadaboo, Wildcat, and quarterbacking it. He even had a quarterback pass. That was a good road win. But again, that is no testament to this team, because last year's team is a night and day difference from what's going on right now.
Yeah, and let's look at some of the premier players that Kansas State features. We have DJ Giddens and Mr. Edwards over here. One of the better, probably one of the best running back cores in the entire Big 12.
100%. Dylan Edwards, previously at Colorado last year, very talented runner, very complimentary. Prime was very complimentary of him on his team. I think he was just looking for better opportunities, and I think he has ties to Kansas State as well. So he came back home, and so it was that RB tandem that they have produced. These guys have been putting up really good numbers. When they do blow out their opponents, it's because of their running games. Their blowouts against West Virginia, U of A, that's because they were able to run the ball so effectively. So I love this RB tandem. I can't wait to see what Cam Scadaboo can do against DJ Giddens. It's going to be a good matchup.
Yeah, it's going to be the big matchup of the evening, and as it is with a lot of Big 12 teams, the Big 12 has really been the conference of running backs this year. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, you just think we've played some of the most talented runners in the entire nation. We've played Devin Neal, Taj Brooks, Ollie Gordon, Corey Kiner,
Micah
Bernard. He's also really good. RJ Harvey last week. He was probably the most well-performing out of all of those guys. And, they're Sunday players. They're going to make it to at least a practice squad. They'll be playing preseason NFL next year. So I really have been impressed by this Big 12 running back committee. But, again, we cover that with our Big 12 breakdowns in the Bell Cows. So this is not new for us.
This is not. Check out all of Trev's videos on the Bell Cows if you're interested. But Avery Johnson also brings a little bit of a running game for Kansas State. Yes. He's a pretty mobile quarterback, 400 yards on the season roughly. 4 touchdowns, a lot like Levitt, actually.
A really cool thing I want to add, Brian Ward's compliments on Avery Johnson, he actually compared him to a Lamar Jackson.
Oh, wow.
Surprisingly, right?
That is very surprising.
And, you put the speed to picture, you put kind of like the body shape as well. They kind of do. They kind of do play alike. It's just that conservative passing game, looking for the wide open reads, but can extend the play, and they almost prefer to extend the play past the X's and O's, escape the pocket, and just make plays like that. So I've been watching Avery Johnson all year. I don't think he's gotten the committee love that other quarterbacks have gotten within the SEC and Big Ten, but I think that's just the nature of the Big 12. I think we're kind of being slept on because we keep beating each other up.
Yeah, I'll agree. I think Big 12, some have said it's a little bit of a top-heavy conference, but I actually don't think so. I think all the teams are, pretty evenly matched to the point where they all beat up on each other, as you're saying, and like a BYU who's had a very easy schedule. Don't get it twisted, okay? BYU's pretty good. They're a solid team, but they have a very easy Big 12 schedule. Very easy. Probably the easiest in the Big 12. So, other than that, though, Big 12's been pretty brutal on each other, right? Yeah. And even, let's look at last week for Kansas, dude. Kansas State losing to Houston.
Yeah, that game was phenomenal. It was a rain game, so what had happened was Avery Johnson got uncomfortable very early in the game, became reckless towards the second half, and the Houston defense, I actually have them top 5 rated in the Big 12. Their defense capitalized on the recklessness of Avery Johnson. It was a good home game for Houston, and they took care of business. So I just think that was a really situational loss for Kansas State. But again, I thought that they should have lost the week before to Kansas as well. So in my opinion, they have 3 Big 12 losses. But again, that's our job now to give them the third.
Yeah, it is our job. And Houston, the Houston that lost to UNLV in game 1 of the season is not the Houston. It's not the Houston we're seeing right now. So Houston's a good team. That's not going to take anything away from.
Their defense is carrying them.
Away from Kansas State, right? Kansas on the road, and just the Big 12 teams on the road in general this year have struggled pretty hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to win on the road. That's why BYU lost last week to Utah, but they got rigged.
Yeah, no, they should have lost. That was ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk. You mentioned something to me before the podcast about how similar the skill position players for both squads are. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so what I really love, I drew comparison to the archetypes of these players. So I saw similarities in Avery Johnson and Sam Levitt's game. I see similarities in Chase Brown and Jordan Tyson's game. See similarities in the play style of having that running back committee, that approach of dominating time of possession, and then finding your explosive play come to you as you play through play action, and then you just open up the field as they stack the box. And I think both of these teams know their identity very well. Yeah. It's like that blue-collar football program that just wants to run the ball, wants to stop the run, and if they're playing with the lead, their defense is going to feast. This team is going to pin back their ears and rush the passer when given the right opportunity to. So, again, it is so important for either of these teams to maintain this as a good competitive game, because if we're down or if they're down, things are going to get ugly. I really think these defenses can hold the lead. So I can't wait to see what's going to go on. I mean, this is one of those games where you can't give a 14-0 lead like we did with Texas Tech. You can't go down on this team. You have to be right there in the thick of the battle up until the blast whistle, because if there's similar archetypes, they're going to be able to respond similarly to how we are playing. So I can't wait to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that. This team cannot go down for Arizona State or Kansas.
Yeah.
Cannot go down 14-0, right? And Arizona State has gone down double digits, and I think every single road game except for Oklahoma State, if I'm correct on that. I should have made a graphic for that, but Arizona State has gotten out to very slow starts.
Down 2 possessions each road game.
Yes, and then second half, Arizona State, I don't know what it is. They just come out looking like a different team.
It's
Brian
defense,
Ward
right?
must give them like the most incredible
Texas Tech only allows
speech.
3 points second half. Cincinnati doesn't score in the second half. Texas State only scores 1 touchdown in the third quarter. This defense really, really gets into its shape, into its full form by the second half. It's a really cool feature of this Brian Ward defense, but I just think it's the mentality of these guys.
And
like he even said it, there's no adjustments, they just buy in.
Yeah, and it's also the offense, right? The offense gets its footing in the second half typically, and if we had good field goal kicking, maybe this team's 8-1 right now. But I want to talk a little bit about the narratives kind of surrounding both teams. I think they're both 7-2, but a lot of people see Kansas State as just clearly the better team, right? And the spread shows that, and them being ranked number 16 also shows that. But I think what separates Kansas State and Arizona State, because both of us are making the argument that this team is a lot more similar to each other than different, right? And I think Kansas State is maybe a year farther along in their progression as a team than Arizona State, but Arizona State is playing way ahead of schedule, and I think that's kind of what factors into it. Kansas State coming into the year was expected to contend for the Big 12. Arizona State was not. So I think the narrative starts that people are using a little bit of confirmation bias with Kansas State, right? They're saying, we think you're good, and you've shown us a couple times this season that you're a good team. You've also showed us that you're a bad team. But in people's minds, those good wins outweighed those bad losses. And I think it's very similar to Arizona State. Now, Arizona State doesn't have that. We thought Utah might be that signature win, but Utah has been pretty shaky this year, right? But they have a Kansas win. They have a UCF win. And so the only thing separating Arizona State from Kansas State right now is narratives. The record shows that. And I think Arizona State is in a position to go out and get a win. Now, will it happen? I'm not sure. Road, Manhattan, end of the year. It's going to be
after a Kansas State bye week.
Yeah, and Kansas State coming off a loss in Houston, right? This is setting up to, be a very difficult game for Arizona State, and will definitely, in my opinion, this is the hardest game on Arizona State's schedule. I've kind of flipped. For a while I was saying Oklahoma State, then I saw Oklahoma State played, then I was saying, maybe Utah, maybe BYU, but, seeing how BYU plays on the road and what Oklahoma State ultimately became, I'm confident in saying that this Kansas State game is the hardest game of the season for Arizona State, cut and dry.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good narrative to push. It's the simple facts, right? Like, Kansas State coming off a great season with Will Howard, and then he transfers over to Ohio State, and they don't blink because they know who they have in office. And then Avery Johnson steps up. I think the biggest separator between this team and our team is which team has the defining wins. Well, Kansas State has actually blown out a few of their opponents. Have we? We haven't blown out anyone since the first 2 weeks of college football. In
our fairly easy non-conference schedule.
Yeah, and there was no difficult matchups for us. We just had to prove to the nation that we were a good football team. But from the standpoint of dominating in the Big 12, we haven't dominated in the Big 12. We've won our dog fights in the Big 12. And I mean, of course, that's what you can do. That's going to you could either use that to tear us down or to build us up, because you could just say lack of strength of schedule or that lack of efficiency. But again, this game is going to be catered to a dogfight. By no means is ASU getting blown out by 21 to Kansas State. Can we at least clear the room by saying that?
Yeah,
there's
absolutely
no way Kansas State blows
Something would have to go very, very wrong.
Yeah, like an injury.
Yeah, an injury, unfortunate fumble.
Injury,
maybe.
Bro.
Yeah.
Let's be real here.
Yeah.
Even if it was an unfortunate fumble, even if we were down 14-0, we're going to put a point on a board, Like, this team is going to perform a lot better than what Arizona did early season in Manhattan. What Kansas State did to West Virginia won't happen to us. Like, we have too good of a defense, too good of a run defense to allow that to happen, to let them just bring the game out of our control. But at the end of the day, when you're national media outside looking in, you're going to see, okay, Kansas State has blown out some teams, ASU hasn't, so I'm probably going to be a little bit more biased towards the Wildcats.
Yeah, and, as we start to wrap up this pod, let's take a look at, around the Big 12 just for a second. I know you do this already, but BYU, Colorado are ahead of Arizona State. If Arizona State takes care of business in Kansas this weekend, in Manhattan, there will be two teams that they have to worry about. Okay?
Yeah.
So who is BYU's loss? And who is Colorado's loss that could potentially get Arizona State into the thick of it for this Big 12 race?
Well, I think it's a really interesting race because I think both BYU and Colorado could slip up. Colorado is going to Kansas, and that is the last home game in that Kansas stadium before they have their new stadium next year. So I feel like just the story within that, Kansas could sneak a good win against Colorado. Again, Utah is a severe underdog. I feel like Oklahoma State will be a severe underdog to Colorado. I don't think both of those teams are going to just lay their head down to the Buffaloes, though. I do think Utah or Oklahoma State will pull up, will respond, and that'll be a great game. But Colorado going to Kansas, that's a hard thing to do. Kansas State got lucky in beating Kansas at the Rock Chalk Jayhawk Stadium. I mean, I think Kansas has been playing at the Chiefs Stadium all year because their stadium has been rebuilding and they're doing something new for next year. But when you just add that kind of context, it's like something to prove. Kansas also is playing for bowl eligibility, so that's why I think they have a hand in potentially beating BYU this week because they're just fighting. They just beat Iowa State. They want to show everyone in the Big 12, hey, we started off bad, but we're one of the legit teams in this conference. Just give us another year. So at the end of the day, there's no way BYU and Colorado win out. Like, in my opinion, there's just no way. I know BYU will lose to us, but, like, it's impossible that these two teams will win out. It is too competitive of a conference, what we've seen this year and just how each team beats each other up. I really like... I mean, if we're a Rock Chalk Jayhawk fan, it's that simple. Like, we need Kansas to win.
So
at
you're
least
predicting
BYU or Colorado.
So you think that Kansas can come out this week, get a win against BYU? And
either that or they beat Colorado.
Okay, so you think they'll get one? You think they'll get one of them?
Yes, and if they beat Colorado, we have tiebreaker over Colorado because we'd have the common opponent wins over Kansas State and Kansas, and they would have lost to Kansas State and Kansas.
It's actually a really good point. Kansas, hey, Jayhawks, if you're listening, in the next 2 weeks, you need to go 1-1. Arizona State wins out, and they find themselves in the Big 12 championship game, right?
Yep.
That's all
they already did it.
needs.
They already handled a little bit of business beating Iowa State. Now Iowa State's at 2 losses, and we own the tiebreaker over Iowa State because both of our teams have lost to Tech, but we beat Kansas, they lost to Kansas.
There we go. And then Colorado, right? They come out and lose, right? And we lose another game? Say we lose the Territorial Cup. I know both of us don't think that'll happen, but then, maybe we'll have the tiebreaker. We'll have to see how it pans out. But the rest of the Buffaloes...
think we need to.
Yeah, because the rest of the Buffalo schedule, okay, is all teams that Arizona State has beaten. Mm-hmm. Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State.
If we get to 3 losses, though, we're playing with fire because Iowa State might only have 2 losses.
Yeah,
then BYU won't drop to 3.
That's a good point.
So we have to win out, guys. But we already know we can. At least I've been saying all year, this Big 12 slate is beatable. Like, each Big 12 team is beatable. I don't even fear Colorado at all. If ASU plays them in the Big 12 championship, I know I'm going Sun Devils all day because Shador hasn't played a defense like us yet. Yeah, and then their defense hasn't gone up against a runner like us.
The best defense they've probably played is Kansas State, and they lost.
Yep.
All right, so something to look forward to, and thank you guys for joining us.
Again, Cam Scadaboo is back this week, which is huge because, Kansas State got a bye week, but so did our bell cow, RB1. And I think it'll be really cool because both DJ Giddens, Cam Scadaboo are at the 1,000-yard mark. They're trying to compete for that top 10 contention in the running back committee nationally, so we'll see which one shows up.
Yeah, and if you guys enjoyed, subscribe. Join the journey we're building here. And
yes, we are. Phoenix Suns season.
Yeah,
the best in the West.
Best in the West, we hope. Thank you guys so much for joining, and let's go Devils.
Make sure to watch more Sun Devil basketball as the season rolls around, and we'll definitely be at
some of the games. Yeah, we'll be at some of the games. All right, thank you guys for joining us.